Bill 50 amends Chapter 5 Building and Chapter 27 Flood Control of the Hawaii County Code 1983-2016 edition as amended to comply with the National Flood Insurance Program NFIP regulations. Pursuant to a letter of final determination dated March 29, 2017, received by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, Hawaii County is required to adopt or amend its flood plain management regulations to reflect changes in the revised flood insurance rate map, FIRM, prior to September 29, 2017, the firm's effective date. Noncompliance may subject the county to suspension from the NFIP, which would make flood insurance and certain types of federal disaster assistance unavailable. Reference Communication 334, introduced by Ms. Ruggles by request.
Thank you. May I have a motion? Thank you. Moved by Ms. Leloy and seconded by Ms. Eoff. Is that correct? Okay, thanks. So this bill I introduced by request, it basically brings our chapters up to date with the requirements of the new federal flood regulations, and we needed to change this before September 27th. Otherwise, we couldn't participate in the federal programs that we need. So this is sort of a housekeeping measure, and we have the department here if anyone needs clarification. With that, I'll yield. Okay. Thank you. Alan, would you like to come up?
Hello, good afternoon, council members. This is Alan Simeon, Deputy Director, DPW. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simeon. Would you please give us a brief description of why we're updating our chapter here?
Yes, I'm hoping that you guys had a chance to read the overview proposed NFIP bill. So technically, we are required to amend the floodplain management ordinance and has to be finished before September 29th of this year. Otherwise, we're going to be unable to take advantage of the help that we get for disaster relief funds, similar to what we were able to get for the lava and also Hurricane Isaiah. And in addition to that, one of the major consequences will be for our community that will suffer for the fact that they may either get a higher rate for insurance, or some of them may not be able to maintain their mortgage because of the bank possibly recalling their mortgage because of non-compliance with the flood insurance requirements. So basically, what was amended in Chapter 5 and Chapter 27 are minor. Some are semantics. The big thing about Chapter 5 is requiring those building auxiliary structures like the ag that right now is exempt from coming to get a building permit. Now we are going to be, after this is adopted, we are going to be requiring them to come and check with us, make sure that their structure that they plan, although exempt, have to be checked by our department to make sure that they do have to comply with the flood management program if they are required. Yeah, yeah. But basically, the two main ones we're going to be able to avail again for the disaster relief funds and also the access to insurance, not only for the county but the whole community. Once we have finalized the adoption of the ordinance before September 29.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alan, for being here. I noticed a number of I guess under chapter 5, I'm sorry, yeah, amending chapter 5 and chapter 27. And forgive me because I'm a little confused because I know them to be two different chapters. So I'm looking at under page 3, there's a number of permits not. Sorry. Under Bill 50, page 3, section 5-19.1, permits not required. This is coming directly out of the IBC code or straightly from FEMA and the federal program?
Our floodplain management personnel here, and if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you can come up.
I know. And then for the record, state your name for the record every time you start talking.
Bryce Harada, Department of Public Works.
Okay. So, Bryce, on Bill 50, page 3, section 5-19.1, there's a number of permits not required. Is this coming right out of the IBC code, or is this coming from the federal flood insurance and compliance with that particular national guideline?
Yeah, it's with the federal.
Federal guideline.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any? Are we going to need to provide amendments to our county IBC code and the IRC code that have a number of or there are not exemptions? And I ask that question because I have a number of clients that go through the building permit process, and I know this applies to flood areas and AE and AH zone areas. But I'm just wondering if we're going to have to make another adjustment with our IRC, which is our International Residential Codes, and then the IBC, which is our International Building Codes. Have we looked at that?
Yeah, I'm not too sure. We'd have to look into that. But yeah, this bill was basically brought to us by our state coordinator, and she told us these are the changes that we need to make. So, yeah.
Yeah, can we, and I'm willing to support this right now because I recognize the timing element that goes with it, and we don't want to lose any type of funding that may happen because we don't adopt this. But again, the type of work that I've done in the past, there's all these other codes that come into play, and we just want to make sure that there is either no conflict or there is an actual bright line of a process when they're trying to develop buildings that may be impacted by the flood zone areas or just other things. And that's all I'm asking.
Yeah, basically all the structures, any kind of structure, this chapter 5 right now, it kind of gets you exempt if you have like the ag buildings or other smaller buildings. But we're just trying to say that any kind of building needs to check with chapter 27.
27.
Yeah, for flood.
Okay, so even like if you're on the shoreline, right? Because we would have flooding related to the shoreline. So if we're building on the shoreline, you would check with 27 first before putting together your building construction plans under 5.
Yes.
Oh, was tough, yeah, that question. Very good. And that's all I'm looking out for. I think, again, a lot of the architects, a lot of the drawers, just civil engineers, all of them, they just really want to understand the process clearly, because what they hate to do is submit something, think that they're complying, and then later on those plans get kicked back. So I'm just trying to look out for that. Thank you.
Alan Simeon again. Anyway, so on this page 4 of this amendment, a new paragraph under B. So section 519.1, permit not required. And all the way down until page 4, we have that B. So basically, that's an added. So right now, with this amendment, we'll be able to kind of build a database, because some of the exemptions now, exempted structures now, they don't even come and talk to us. So with this, while complying with Chapter 27, we'll also have a database of who has this, because when somebody sells a property and it doesn't have a permit, then that can be a question. But if they can show that they did check with the Public Works and they can show that it's technically legal under the exemption, and that would solve that problem. Yeah. Thank you.
Ms. O'Hara.
Thank you, Chair. I just, I understand this is a requirement, and it seems that we haven't added much, but we have, in terms of, let's see, Section 5-19.1, which or used to be just 519 B, exceptions a permit is not required for. There's no change in that list of 24 items, is there? No, it's just the same. It's just moved around and, okay.
That's correct, yeah.
I'm just trying to follow. So can you, in just a few words, tell us what changes, substantive changes were actually made? I see that the addition of B under that, those 24 items is a new section that you just pointed out. And then further on page 5, this chapter shall not apply to, and that's all been crossed out. And then further, appears we've added mud flows that we didn't have in there before. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Mudslide, yeah.
Whatever you want to call them.
Yes.
Okay, and then on page 6, the addition of the expansion to an existing manufactured home park or subdivision.
Yeah, that's a new section.
That's new language that wasn't in here at all before, or was just moved around?
I believe that's new one, yeah.
Yeah, that's a new one.
That's a new one, that's what I thought. Okay, I'm just trying to get a feel for what real changes we made here, and what we just moved around.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if, I'm not sure if you have this handout, the one 2-page
Yeah, I believe
handout.
that.
But on the second page, on the back, it says changes made by the proposed NFIP bill, and it kind of just summarizes real briefly what changes we're making. So most of them are just like definitions that need to be updated or things that need to be deleted.
It's a communication, 334.1.
Yeah, so none of the changes are substantial. They're all just, yeah. Yeah, just kind of keeping it updated, and yeah, that's about it.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted a little clarification, because it looks complicated on
Yeah,
first glance, but it's
It's not that, yeah,
not
it's-
really.
it
Okay, thank
looks long, but it's not really much changes.
Mr. Richards?
Thank you, Chair. And this is kind of more of a informational question. Is this in response, because I know they've changed the floodplain maps, and is this part of all of that? This was something that came up when we were at the Western Region meeting of the National Association of Counties, and they had talked about this, and it's more inclusive maps. They had pertains, and help me out, Councilman Kanuha, had to do, as I recall, with how they deemed what could be flooded now, whereas before. So in changing the maps, is that's what triggering the changing of this? And I agree, this is a bit of a housekeeping. But that being said, I know one of my constituents just told me yesterday that their house is now in a floodplain where it wasn't previously. So is this part of that process?
So this is our study, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
This is part of the digital flood insurance rate maps that that are going to be effective in September 29th of this year. So, yeah, this is part of that.
Okay.
But as far as, what was your question again?
Well,
Sorry.
I just, if this was part of that, so then do we know how much more of our land mass is going to be included in floodplains that wasn't previously? No.
So basically, the new firm maps, yeah. So it's probably upgraded, so it may change as far as the land mass.
Have we seen that number yet? The reason I'm asking is because this is something that we ran into while we were at this meeting, and it had to do with the dike systems around rivers, and if the Corps of Engineers deemed that these dikes were not high enough, deemed on a 100-year flood, I think it was, then the dikes didn't count, and so the inundation area was substantially increased.
I see.
And then I was just told by a constituent yesterday that her house is now in a floodplain where it's never been before.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my question. I think we have to do this because it's housekeeping. If we don't, we're not going to comply.
Yes.
But I do know there's efforts right now to address this nationally, and I'm not sure where we are with all that. And I realize big question for you guys, but are you familiar with what's going on with all this stuff?
I believe that's separate. That
I think what Bryce is saying is that we do have, don't want to mention it, but because it's for another day discussion. Like we had the Puna flood study, for example, and also for the Kuna side. Yeah, so those are being mapped now or had been mapped, but may need to be revisited as far as what a community is affected or what property is affected and how much they are affected. We're working with our consultant to have those reviewed and also revised if have to. So that's going to be done on another, I guess, day per se.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So, but this is all tied back to that same thing, which is a problem nationally because
Yes.
it's affecting everybody.
Yes, that's
And
correct.
substantially increasing costs for a lot of people. So.
Yes, and some properties that were not per se, it wasn't a flood zone before because of the added studies. Now it's being mapped. They may be in a flood zone. Yeah.
Yeah, and the validity of those studies are being brought to question, and that's the big thing. So, okay, I yield.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Poindexter?
Yeah, I may be off base or trying to understand this, or wrap my head around this. Because I know, like, in Ocala, we should be in the floodplain, and which would definitely decrease the value of all our homes in that community.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that because Mauka lands, whenever you develop on Mauka lands,
Whatever.
anywhere on this island, if you don't do it right, you're going to end up being in a flood plain.
Yes.
And then you're going to have to continuously start assessing, do we have the correct floodplain maps and areas that are in floodplains? I'm concerned about that. I'm working on that with some groups,
Okay.
looking at the entire island and stormwater runoff.
Mm-hmm.
So we're getting together. So I was concerned that some of the things that were exempt, like work performed under the jurisdiction of federal government and are located on federal property. So the county wouldn't check, or they wouldn't check with the county, is this, in Ocala's case, 12 to 19% slopes on highly erodible soil. So you're talking about building, one of the exemptions is detached structures for animal shelters, storage shed, towers, and similar uses not more than 6 feet in height. Even if it's that, if you do something like that on that property above our community, you're going to cause a lot of damage down below if they don't get the correct permits. So when I'm reading this, it's kind of bringing up red flags for me in our communities that live on the Hamakua coast that the Mauka lands are, most of it is highly erodible soil. Some of it is with trees, I've planted with eucalyptus trees. Those were kind of taken care of. I'm talking about some of the more open land area that we're just bringing in more either industrial use or larger farming areas. So
Legalized.
I'm a little concerned with this, and I don't know if I should be, and if I'm reading it correctly, and my caution of small rural communities that we're not looking at when we're developing the exemptions. So I don't know if my concerns are real. Bryce, maybe you can answer that because you've been dealing with the exemption that the county gave this big operation that has flooded our community out, and they exempted the permits. So based on NRCS saying, oh, by the way, we have these plans, but they weren't following it, so the county gave them the exemption, and then now we're in a floodplain right now. That caused the floodplain.
Yeah, that's a little separate. But as far as this proposed bill, that's nothing for that.
Nothing for that. So the exemptions of them, so this meaning that they couldn't go build other animal shelters up on that property, they still would have to come for grub and grading permits? Or does this exempt them? Because it says no need a permit. Or
Alan Simeon. Yes, I think in the case, I think I know what you're talking about as far as the dairy. I believe as far as the other requirements, like the grading requirements, grubbing requirements, it still would be in effect. But by the fact that they are under the Hamakua Water Conservation, if they have a plan, which we're supposed to review and approve as well.
and monitor.
And that's where the enforcement comes in. Yes. Yeah. So as far as trying to get the exemption, we still need to get something from them for us to give them the exemption.
Yes. So my question was, does that kind of blend into what that is, or this is like a totally separate thing, and you're still going to hold people accountable and
under the other chapters, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
They cannot use this as an excuse and go, oh, by the way, we get this exemption right over here.
Yes.
We can use this.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is separate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to let the record show that Mr. Richards has left us at this point. He had to attend matters in his district having to do with school safety. Okay, go ahead, Ms. David.
Thank you, Chair. And mahalo, Deputy Director, for that explanation. I just had a question. This is to get the county in compliance with the requirements.
That's correct.
And is it also, is the state also being required to revise its statutes to also conform? And so is the state and a county level revisions that we're looking at also?
Can you answer that?
Or is it just a county?
Yeah, this is just a county one.
Just the county one?
Yeah.
So nothing on the state level is being done to, I understood that they had to do, come into compliance also in some respects.
That was separate.
That's a separate thing, but is it being done, are they under the same timeline as we are, as the county?
No.
No.
That one is, I think that's the ag bill one with the state, or I'm actually not too sure, but as far as this is just the county one.
Okay. And then I'd like to, before, that was my question, whether we were the only ones being required to do this, to come into compliance. And my second comment is on, basically on what Councilmember Richards had stated in the mapping process. Because I think there has been in the past, there have been a lot of situations where the mapping process itself had resulted in the things that Mr. Richards was noting his concerns about, where areas that had not been in a flood zone before are now appearing in flood zones. And I think it also connects to what Ms. Poindexter is saying, because land alteration basically can create things that was non-existent before. So I don't have any particular question. I just wanted to note that Mr. Rich's concern is also a very
Valid.
important concern that I have, especially in my district. And I will talk story with you folks later on about that. So, but I appreciate your folks bringing this forward. Thank you.
Mr. Kanuha.
Thank you. And Mr. Richards isn't here, but try to elaborate on what we were talking about at the Western Interstate region. And, counties are having issues with FEMA and the floodplain maps. Just give an example, in Tillamook County, I think in Washington, was it Washington or Oregon? Anyways, one of those where an entire area was designated in a floodplain zone, which meant that, they produce all the cheese and they have all the cows, and they were going to be taking out these areas because now it's designated as a floodplain, and they would have to get insurance for it and do all this kind of stuff. And it was a huge problem for this county.
Somebody's mic is on the outer sites.
And they're having issues. So
He's gonna
hello.
try singing it. Make your voice sound good.
Sorry, just wait for the technical difficulties.
Okay, I think we're good.
Sorry. And and just seeing how other counties are trying to deal with it, and just waiting, the national government, the feds and the Congress is, trying to update these maps and going through all the regulations like all the time, and they're having a lot of issues in figuring out how to, do that, and it always comes back to them, putting all these mandates on states and local governments of how to manage this juggernaut of a flood insurance thing. But I don't want to go into too many details about this. I know we're just trying to get into the compliance mode of being part of this from the Fed's regulation. But this is kind of in conjunction with the maps that did come out, and I'm not going to try to. I know our current director was in charge of mapping those the floodplain or the county's floodways and maps. And I know there was a few issues that we've had, especially in Kona, of certain individuals and property owners being part of the flood. Now they're part of it, which they weren't in the past, and trying to deal with how to comply if they are going to be part of this, and how to not be part of it. If there's a conflict, how does a person contest that they're now going to be in that, and what is the process of doing that? Do they need to hire an expert that'll cost them thousands and thousands of dollars to contest why they're now in that floodplain? Just some issues that I'm sure that we, just a normal everyday person has no idea how to do this kind of stuff. So it's hard. It's even hard for me to understand a lot of what's going on here. So, and I know we're going to be dealing with the maps came out. I think, when is the deadline for community input that we just got the notification about? Oh, so it's coming up soon, right?
Wait, what was the question? For
Just
the deadline for
the deadline for, I guess, community input on the flood map, the map.
Oh, for this?
The floodplain map.
the public input is finished already. Yeah, that was like a year or two ago. This is just basically telling everyone it's gonna be finalized in September, and just notifying everyone, and we just have to get a compliant code.
Okay. Yeah, so already Paul. Okay. Thank you. It's just, yeah, I'll yield it this time.
Ms. Poindexter.
Yeah. Just for clarification, okay, back to that, what I was talking about. But so basically, you took out all of this, and all you did is rearrange it differently and nicely.
Oh, that list,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So you guys didn't delete anything or say, hey, this shouldn't be in that or anything. So I have a question. If somebody's going to do a reservoir up there, it says they don't need a permit, but they would still need to come in for a grub and grading permit, correct or no?
I believe that's correct.
Okay, you
Yeah.
believe that's correct. I would like to make sure that is correct because, that's happening on, like I said, most of our communities live on the Makai, right? The Mauka is where a lot of activity, developments are going on. So I want to make sure that any grub and grading happens, Mauka has to go through you, and this exemptions doesn't include, if it says, oh, we're going to, by the way, we're putting it in a reservoir and we don't need the permit for that, but oh, by the way, we still got to go get the grub and grading because, highly erodible soil. We're going to come down into the Ocala community. We better have insurance to protect them, and FEMA can't come in and help. We in that floodplain. So I want to make sure all of that is in place, and we don't just give them a loophole to get out of this.
Yes. Yeah, so basically, the beauty of this is for them to come and check with us. And Bryce, with his team, with the regulatory section, there will also be the one responsible for grading and grabbing.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we can make sure, because like I said, we have so much Mauka development going on, and our maps are not in good shape right now because we're allowing people on ag land to do whatever, and then it's flooding out. And it's not just in Ocala, it's happening throughout my coastline. And I've gotten even calls from Kona, concerned about the developments in Mauka and that floodwaters are coming down. And they just heard, because that was happening in Ocala, how I felt about that and what am I doing. So we know DPW had to go up there and go look, and we know what's happening even in Honomu and Hakalau and all that area I've been working with DPW on, and the flooding that's going on in those communities. So I just want to make sure everything fitting together so that people don't have loopholes and get away with stuff. So thank you.
And also, the community has a way, because of the enforcement capacity that we have, we may not be able to go and check all the time.
Right.
That's where the community is very instrumental in letting us know.
And we've been calling from 2012.
Yeah.
And now it's 2017, and county just went out last month.
Yeah.
Took a look at it. So that's why I'm concerned.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
understandable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay. With that, thank you for being here. Thank you for answering our questions and for moving this forward and making sure we're up to date and protected.
Okay. Thanks.
All those in favor of Bill 50, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have 7 ayes and 2 excused. May I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you. Moved by Ms. Leloy, seconded by Ms. David. We are adjourned.